Ancient Greece was a land characterized by its unique political landscape, setting it apart from most contemporary societies of its time. While other civilizations were often tribal or ruled by expansive kingdoms, Greece was a patchwork of several hundred relatively independent city-states, known as polis. This distinctive arrangement was heavily influenced by Greece's geography, marked by its division into smaller territories by hills, mountains, and rivers. Although the ancient Greeks acknowledged a shared identity as one people, bound by a common religion, culture, and language, they also held a deep connection to their tribal origins. Herodotus meticulously categorized the city-states based on their tribal affiliations. Yet, despite these higher-level associations, they seldom played a significant role in Greek politics. The polis fiercely guarded their autonomy, rarely entertaining the idea of unification. Even during the Second Persian invasion of Greece, when some city-states formed alliances to defend their homeland, the majority remained neutral. After the Persians were defeated, the alliances swiftly dissolved, giving way to internal conflicts. The key features of the ancient Greek political system were its fragmented nature, which did not appear to stem primarily from tribal influences, and its emphasis on urban centers within these relatively small states. This distinct political setup was further exemplified by the Greek colonies scattered across the Mediterranean. While these colonies might acknowledge a particular Greek polis as their mother city and maintain a sense of connection to it, they operated independently from their founding city. In instances where smaller polis found themselves under the influence of larger neighbors, outright conquest or direct rule by another city-state was a rare occurrence. Instead, the polis tended to form leagues, and membership within these leagues constantly shifted. In the later classical period, these leagues consolidated, with one city, notably Athens, Sparta, or Thebes, often exerting dominance. Sometimes, polis were compelled to join these leagues under the threat of war or as part of a peace agreement. Even when Philip II of Macedon achieved considerable control over the heartlands of ancient Greece, he refrained from annexing the territory or establishing a unified province. Instead, he persuaded most polis to join his Corinthian League, preserving a semblance of their individual autonomy within the framework of his league. Originally, many Greek city-states appeared to function as small-scale kingdoms. Often, there was a city official tasked with carrying out certain ceremonial duties reminiscent of a king, such as the Archon Basileus in Athens. However, as we move into the Archaic period and the era of recorded history, most of these city-states had transformed into aristocratic oligarchies. The exact process of this transformation remains somewhat mysterious. For instance, in Athens, the kingship had evolved into a hereditary, lifelong chief magistracy, archon, by around 1050 BC. By 753 BC, this position had become decennial and was elected, and eventually, by 683 BC, it became an annually elected archonship. At each stage of this evolution, more power shifted from a single individual to the aristocracy as a whole. Predictably, as politics and wealth became increasingly concentrated within a few influential families, social unrest became a common issue in many city-states. To address this, a figure known as a tyrant, not in the modern oppressive sense, would often seize control and rule according to their own discretion, often appealing to a populist agenda. In a society rife with class conflict, government by a strongman was often seen as the most viable solution. In the latter half of the 6th century BC, Athens fell under the rule of a tyrant. When this tyranny was overthrown, the Athenians introduced the world's first democracy as a radical measure to prevent the aristocracy from regaining power. A citizens' assembly called the Ecclesia, responsible for discussing city policies, had existed since Draco's reforms in 621 BC. While Solon's reforms in the early 6th century allowed all citizens to attend the assembly, the poorest citizens were still barred from addressing the assembly or running for office. With the establishment of democracy, the assembly became the official governing mechanism, granting all citizens equal rights to participate. However, non-citizens, including metics, foreign residents in Athens, and slaves, were devoid of political rights. Following the rise of democracy in Athens, other city-states also adopted democratic systems, though many clung to more traditional forms of government. Sparta, in its usual fashion, stood out as a notable exception in Greece. It was governed throughout this period not by a single monarch but by two hereditary monarchs, a system referred to as diarchy. The kings of Sparta belonged to the Agiads and the Eurypontids, both descended from Eurysthenes and Proclus. These dynastic founders were believed to be the twin sons of Aristodemus, a Heraclid ruler. However, the powers of these kings were kept in check by both a council of elders called the Gerousia and magistrates designated to oversee the kings, known as the ephors. Regarding the social structure, only free, land-owning, native-born men could be citizens entitled to full legal protection within a city-state. Unlike in Rome, social status did not typically grant special rights in most Greek city-states. Some families might control public religious functions, but this rarely translated to extra political power. In Athens, the population was divided into four social classes based on wealth, with the possibility of moving between classes based on economic success. In contrast, in Sparta, all male citizens were considered equals, referred to as peers. However, Spartan kings, who served as both military and religious leaders, came from two specific families. In ancient times, the status of slaves was marked by powerlessness and a lack of social standing. They possessed the limited right to form families and own property, but these privileges were contingent upon the goodwill and permission of their masters. Unfortunately, slaves had no access to political rights. By the year 600 BC, the practice of chattel slavery had taken hold in Greece, becoming increasingly prevalent. In fact, during the 5th century BC, slaves constituted as much as one-third of the population in certain city-states, with classical Athens, in particular, boasting a slave population that ranged from 40% to 80% of its total inhabitants. Curiously, unlike the later Western societies, ancient Greece did not categorize individuals based on race. Instead, their enslavement was often a consequence of their circumstances, nationality, or other factors. The institution of slavery was pervasive, with many families owning slaves who served as household laborers and servants. Even economically disadvantaged households might possess a few slaves. Importantly, there were restrictions in place that prohibited owners from inflicting physical harm or killing their slaves. In a bid to motivate their slaves to work diligently, owners would sometimes promise them future freedom. However, it's worth noting that, unlike in Rome, freedmen did not attain citizenship. Instead, they were integrated into the metics, a category comprising individuals from foreign lands or other city-states who were officially permitted to reside within the state. Notably, city-states themselves were legal owners of slaves. Public slaves, in this context, enjoyed a greater degree of independence compared to slaves owned by individual families. They often lived on their own and were assigned specialized tasks. For instance, in Athens, public slaves were trained to detect counterfeit coinage, while temple slaves served the deities of the temples. Scythian slaves in Athens, on the other hand, served as a type of police force responsible for guiding citizens to political functions. In the case of Sparta, a unique form of slavery was prevalent known as helots. Helots were Messenians who had been collectively enslaved during the Messenian Wars by the Spartan state and distributed among Spartan families. They were compelled to remain with these families and undertook agricultural work and household duties. This arrangement allowed Spartan women to focus on raising strong children, while men could dedicate their time to military training as hoplites. Helots were subjected to harsh treatment, which occasionally led to uprisings against their masters. A significant turning point occurred in 370 to 69 BC when Epaminondas liberated Messenia from Spartan rule, thereby bringing an end to the Helot system in that region, granting Helots their freedom. However, this system persisted in Laconia until the 2nd century BC,